The standoff between Burkina Faso and Ghana has quickly become one of the most remarkable and unsettling developments in West African geopolitics, a story that has traveled far beyond the borders of the region. In an age where African nations are reclaiming sovereignty and asserting new paths independent of foreign dictates, the sudden blocking of Ghana at the Burkina Faso border under the directive of Ibrahim Traoré sent shockwaves across the continent. What at first seemed like an isolated border security incident soon transformed into a far-reaching diplomatic confrontation with implications for trade, regional alliances, and Africa's growing quest for self-determination. To understand why this episode resonates so deeply, we must look not only at the present circumstances, but also at the historical undercurrents, the personalities involved, and the regional rivalries that have long simmered beneath the surface. Burkina Faso and Ghana share more than just a border. For decades, the two nations have traded goods, culture, and people across porous boundaries. Entire communities span both sides, and countless families hold ties that transcend official lines on a map. Yet, in recent years, the relationship between the governments of the two nations has grown complicated. Ghana, often praised as a beacon of democracy in West Africa, has leaned heavily on Western support, relying on IMF loans, foreign aid packages, and Western corporate partnerships to fuel its economy. Burkina Faso, under Traoré, by contrast, has chosen a dramatically different path, one that rejects dependency on France, distances itself from Western interference, and seeks solidarity with neighboring Sahel states through the alliance of Sahel states, including Mali and Niger. These diverging approaches set the stage for friction, and the border crisis became the flashpoint. The actual incident unfolded with striking speed. Burkina Faso announced restrictions on the movement of goods and people coming from Ghana into its territory, citing security concerns, illicit smuggling routes, and the need to protect national sovereignty from external influence. Trucks carrying produce, fuel, and manufactured goods suddenly found themselves halted at checkpoints, with armed Burkinabe forces refusing passage. For traders who rely on cross-border flows to sustain livelihoods, this was devastating. But to the political leadership in Ghana, the move carried deeper implications. It was not just about trade. It was about a symbolic assertion of power from Burkina Faso, which under Traoré has increasingly styled itself as the vanguard of African resistance to Western domination. To many observers, the incident revealed how fragile regional integration remains. The Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, long touted as a framework for free movement of goods and people, has been under immense strain in recent years. Sanctions on Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso following their military-led governments only deepened the mistrust between reformist leaders and their pro-Western neighbors. By blocking Ghana, Burkina Faso sent a clear message not only to Accra, but to the entire region. Alliances with Western powers come at a cost, and neighbors who align too closely with external actors risk losing access to cooperation from revolutionary Sahelian states. The response from Ghana was swift but measured. Officials in Accra expressed deep concern, highlighting the economic disruption and the violation of regional agreements. Behind the scenes, however, there was anger. Ghanaian businesses lost millions in a matter of days, with perishable goods spoiling at the border and fuel shortages looming in northern Ghanaian towns. Local traders protested, blaming both governments for escalating tensions. Ghanaian media outlets portrayed Traoré as reckless and confrontational, while Burkinabe outlets defended the move as a necessary safeguard against infiltration, smuggling, and hidden foreign interference. International reactions only added to the drama. France and the European Union, already frustrated by their loss of influence in Burkina Faso, saw the crisis as evidence of the destabilizing effects of Traoré's leadership. Washington expressed concern about the humanitarian consequences of border restrictions, while Moscow and Beijing watched with interest, seeing in the episode further proof that Africa's political order was shifting. Within Africa itself, the shock was profound. Nigeria, the region's economic powerhouse, quietly feared that escalating confrontations like this could unravel what little cohesion ECOWAS still had left. Smaller nations worried that if such disputes continued, trade routes across the Sahel and coastal West Africa could become unworkable, crippling economic prospects. At the heart of the issue lies Ibrahim Traoré's vision for Burkina Faso. Since taking power, he has made no secret of his distrust of Western economic models and his determination to insulate his country from exploitative practices. Closing the border to Ghana was not only a tactical move but also a symbolic one. Traoré sought to highlight the dangers of aligning too closely with Western powers at the expense of African unity. By cutting off Ghana, he reminded neighboring states that sovereignty comes with responsibility and that Burkina Faso would not tolerate becoming a transit corridor for foreign-controlled agendas. In this sense, the border standoff was not merely a clash between two neighbors, but an ideological confrontation between two models of governance in Africa, one still tethered to Western prescriptions and another striving to chart its own path. What makes this moment particularly striking is that Burkina Faso, a relatively small and landlocked country, has managed to wield disproportionate influence in shaping the conversation about Africa's future. Its decision to block Ghana's access might seem like a localized matter, but it quickly spiraled into a continental debate about sovereignty, independence, and the balance of power. Social media across Africa buzzed with debates. Supporters of Traoré hailed the move as bold and necessary, proof that Africa could no longer be bullied into submission. Critics accused him of destabilizing the region, endangering ordinary people, and undermining regional solidarity. Economically, the consequences of the standoff are already visible. Burkina Faso has sought to redirect trade flows toward Mali and Niger, deepening its alliance with fellow Sahelian states. Ghana, in turn, has been forced to look southward, strengthening its reliance on coastal trade routes through Togo and Ivory Coast. This reshaping of trade networks underscores a broader geopolitical realignment underway in West Africa, where ideological alliances increasingly determine access to markets, roads, and resources. For multinational corporations and foreign governments, this presents both challenges and opportunities. Those who adapt to Africa's new realities may find ways to thrive, while those who cling to old models of influence risk being locked out. Diplomatically, efforts are underway to de-escalate the situation. Mediation attempts have been floated by Nigeria and the African Union, but progress is slow. Both sides remain entrenched, with Traoré unwilling to appear weak by reversing his decision and Ghana reluctant to concede ground. Behind the posturing, however, both governments know that prolonged confrontation could harm their people and economies. The risk of escalation remains, especially if border communities grow restless or if outside actors attempt to exploit the crisis for their own gain. What gives this crisis such resonance is the larger story of Africa's awakening. For too long, borders drawn by colonial powers have dictated the fate of African nations. Today, under leaders like Traoré, those borders are being reimagined, not just as lines of division, but as points of leverage, as tools to assert sovereignty in the face of both neighbors and external powers. Blocking Ghana was not simply about a road or a truckload of goods. It was about redefining what it means to be independent in the 21st century. As the standoff continues, questions abound. Will Ghana and Burkina Faso find a path toward reconciliation, or will this crisis deepen the rift between pro-Western and reformist states in West Africa? Will ECOWAS survive in its current form, or will it fracture under the weight of competing visions for Africa's future? And perhaps most importantly, what lessons will other African nations draw from this showdown? Will they see it as a warning against defiance, or as an inspiration to reclaim their sovereignty regardless of the cost? The answer to these questions will shape the region for years to come. But one thing is already clear. Ibrahim Traoré has once again succeeded in making Burkina Faso the focal point of Africa's ongoing struggle for autonomy, dignity, and self-determination. The border blockade with Ghana may eventually be resolved, but the shockwaves it has generated will not fade quickly. It has forced Africa and the world to confront the new realities of power on the continent. Realities where small nations can make big statements and where leaders unafraid of confrontation can reset the terms of engagement. In the end, the story of Burkina Faso blocking Ghana is not simply about two nations in dispute. It is about Africa itself, at a crossroads between old dependencies and new possibilities. It is about whether the continent can forge unity on its own terms or whether it will remain vulnerable to division and manipulation. And it is about the growing recognition that Africa's future will not be dictated in Paris, Washington, or Beijing, but in Ouagadougou, Accra, Abuja, Bamako, and countless other African capitals. For now, the world watches as two neighbors grapple with their differences. But the deeper truth is that the outcome of this crisis will reverberate far beyond their shared border. It will echo across the entire continent, shaping the next chapter of Africa's unfolding story.